Okay, my name is Moxie Marlinspike. I'm from the Institute for Disruptive Studies. I don't really like introductions, so I wanted to take this time to introduce somebody else, two friends of mine, who are probably two of my favorite people in the world. We're hiking through Kurdish Iraq, and were kidnapped by the Iranian military. And as of this Saturday, they will have been in Iranian prison for exactly 1 year. So anyway, I think about them all the time, and I just want other people to know that there are people, stuck in jail in Iran. But today I want to take some time to think about privacy. And what I want to do is start by looking into the past, thinking about the things that we thought were important, the threats that we thought we faced, the things that we thought were worth working on. And then I want to take some time to talk about how I think trends have sort of changed, and then look into the future of things that I think are going to be important moving forward, things that I'm interested in working on, and perhaps other people might be interested in working on as well. So looking into the past, the sort of technology narrative of the 90s was largely dominated by this thing, the web browser, right? When Netscape first introduced Netscape Navigator, it was almost revolutionary, and a lot of people moved to immediately capitalize on that knowledge. One of the major players that wanted to protect their interests were Microsoft, and so they introduced Internet Explorer. And at that moment, the technology narrative was transformed from more than just the web browser to this war between web browsers, the browser wars. And we all know how that turned out. But at the same time, there was another war that was happening, and it was just as fierce, and perhaps more important, although much more subtle. And it was a war over this thing, the little lock icon in your web browser, and more importantly, the technology and the ideas behind it. On one side of this war were the cypherpunks. These were people who wanted to promote this information and distribute it widely so that many people could use it. And on the other side of this war were the eavesdroppers. These are people who wanted to prevent the spread of this information. They wanted to control these ideas so that not many people could use them. And so the lines were drawn. And on the cypherpunk side, you had people like Matt Blaze, Philip Zimmerman, Ian Goldberg, David Shum, and Timothy May, the heroes of my teenage years. And the eavesdroppers thought that these people were dangerous. In fact, their ideas scared the fuck out of them. They were talking about the move from a world where the eavesdroppers had ultimate control and access to all information to a world where they would have no control and no access to any information. And in fact, they thought that these ideas were so dangerous that they classified them as weapons. If you were to write a little bit of crypto code and send it to your friend in Canada, that was tantamount to exporting munitions, and you could be tried and prosecuted as such. At the same time, the government realized that these ideas around privacy could be important. That people might want this privacy thing. And so they decided that they needed their own solution. And so they came up with this idea called key escrow. And it was best embodied by this chip, the Clipper chip. And the idea was they wanted to embed this chip in every piece of consumer communications electronics. Every telephone, every fax machine, every computer would have one of these in it. And it's a little, closed circuit, and it does cryptography for you and allows you to communicate securely. The only catch is that then the government has the equivalent of a master key, which they can then use to decrypt anything that they wanted to read. And so their problem was that cryptography is not a banana, which is to say that it is difficult to treat information as an object. That if I have a banana and I share it with one person, there is still only one banana in the world. If they share it with another person, there is still only one banana in the world. If, however, I share an idea with somebody or information with somebody, then now there are two copies, and each time somebody shares something, there's the potential for an exponential explosion. And so this was made worse for them by the cypherpunks mantra, cypherpunks write code. A lot of good work had been done in academia in developing public key cryptography and crypto systems outside of government circles. But the cypherpunks wanted actual software that people could use, things that people would download and run to communicate securely right now. And so they kind of went nuts. Some people moved to Anguilla, which is an island in the Caribbean that has very favorable laws in terms of exporting cryptography, and they went there to write crypto code and send it throughout the world. Other people had some more creative strategies. In 1995, Philip Zimmerman, in conjunction with MIT Press, published this book called PGP, Source Code and Internals. And the deal was it's just the PGP source code printed into a book in a machine-readable font. Because the deal is that digital representations of cryptography are weapons, but if you print it in a book, then that's speech. And so they just printed the book, a very small print run, and then mailed it everywhere in the world that they wanted cryptography. And then those people just scanned it back in because it was a machine-readable font, and now everybody had PGP. So anyway, these strategies continued, and people were very successful in distributing cryptography throughout the world, and people ramped up their efforts more and more. And then in 2000, suddenly the Clinton administration repealed all of the significant laws regulating the export of cryptography. And it sort of seemed like the game was over, that the world was won, that the cypherpunks had won this war. And if you go back and you look at their predictions, their first prediction, their sort of ultimate prediction, turned out to be incredibly prescient, right? Which is just that cryptography would inevitably become ubiquitous. And this was one of the first times that we saw that information really does want to be free. That it's hard to control. But then if you go and you look at their predictions of what would happen once cryptography was ubiquitous, they're somewhat less prescient. That anonymous digital cash would flourish, that intellectual property would disappear, that surveillance would become impossible, that governments would be unable to continue collecting taxes, and that eventually governments would fall, all from the distribution of cryptography. If we flash forward 10 years from the sort of the mark of these predictions, cryptography is the thing that allows you to securely transmit your credit card number to Amazon.com so you can buy a copy of Sarah Palin's book on Going Rogue. Sure, some of these things have been eroded, but surveillance is probably at an all-time high, and privacy is probably at an all-time low. So what happened, We thought we were, engaged in this war, and it seemed like we won, and here we are in this strange situation. Well, I think my sort of thesis here is that in many ways I feel like the cypherpunks were preparing for a future. And the future that they anticipated was fascism. But what we got was social democracy. And it's not necessarily better, it's just different. So let me give you an example. How many people here would feel good about a law that required everyone to carry government-mandated tracking devices on them at all times? One person, you have to leave. You're not welcome here. Yeah, pretty much nobody, right? Nobody feels good about that law. So that's fascism, right? That's the fascist world that the cypherpunks anticipated. Now let me ask another question. How many people here carry a cell phone? Right. Everybody. Pretty much, I'm guessing everybody in this room carries a cell phone. And that's social democracy, right? But so ultimately, what is the difference between a government-mandated tracking device and a cell phone, right? I mean, logistically, they're the same. Your cell phone records your real-time position and reports that to a telecommunications company that is required by law to turn that information over to the government. So what is the difference between a government-mandated tracking device and a cell phone? I mean, no difference, right? Like, if we were all supposed to be carrying government-mandated tracking devices, we'd be riding in the streets right now, but we're not riding in the streets, so why? But you do, choice. There you go. You choose to carry a cell phone, whereas, the government would make you do this other thing. So let's talk about choice. Never in my wildest dreams did I think that I would have a cell phone. I mean, why would I? There are these mobile tracking devices, there are mobile bugs, they operate over an insecure protocol. And yet I do. I have one, and I carry it with me all the time. I have it with me right now. Well, I think if we look at the way that people tend to organize and communicate in groups, often there are sort of informal connections that allow people to communicate and collaborate, that bind people together. And if you introduce sort of a more codified communications channel, there's this well-known problem called the no network effect, where now if I invent this thing and I start using it, my problem is that if I'm the only one using it, it's not really worth very much, that the value of a network is in the number of nodes that are connected to it. If, however, I somehow manage to get everyone to start using my communications network, then it becomes very valuable. But there's a side effect, which is that the old informal mechanisms for communication and collaboration are destroyed. That technology actually changes the fabric of society. So then what happens is there's the inverse problem, where now if I decide that I don't want to participate in this new codified communications channel, once again, I am struck by the no network effect. Because essentially I am now choosing to be a part of a different network, the old network, that has been destroyed. It no longer really exists. Those channels aren't there anymore. And it's easy to see how technology changes the fabric of society. I mean, there are very trivial examples that you look at with cell phones, right? Like people used to make plans. They would say, I'll meet you at this time at this street corner and we'll do this thing. And now people say, I'll call you when I get off work. And so if you don't have this technology, you can't really participate in society in that sense, right? So yeah, I made a choice to have a cell phone, but what kind of choice did I make, right? And so I think that this is how it basically goes, is that there is this push to expand the scope of the choices that we have to make. The choice starts off very simple, right? Do I have a piece of consumer electronics in my pocket or not? And that slowly, over time, the scope of that choice continues to expand until I'm making a choice of whether to participate in society or not. That on some level today, to have a cell phone or not have a cell phone is becoming a choice to be a part of society or not be a part of society. And that's a much bigger choice than just, do I have this piece of electronics or not? So I think if we start looking at this pattern of small choices that become big choices, you really start to see it everywhere. One of my most favorite recent examples is from this Firefox add-on called AdBlock Plus. I'm sure people are familiar with this. The basic way that it works is that it allows you to block ads in your web browser, and it does that by allowing you to specify a list of regular expressions that describe URLs that are likely to be ad network URLs. And so the problem is, right, you can pretty accurately describe all the URLs you want to block, but these URLs are sort of changing on some regular basis, and so it could be a pain to try and keep up with these URLs as they change. And so they've done this pretty smart thing where they allow you to subscribe to lists of regular expressions to block, and then other people maintain those lists. And so some people are sort of on it, maintaining the list, and everyone else benefits from these updates. And so this is used also for other things beyond just ads, right? Like I'm subscribed to a list that blocks trackers. So these are web bugs that track your movements around the web. And there's somebody who maintains this list of trackers to block. And of course, one of the trackers that I'm most interested in blocking is Google Analytics, right? Because that's not bad at all. And something interesting happened where one day Google Analytics disappeared from my list of trackers to block. That whoever's maintaining the subscription removed it. And so if you think about like the old way, the old world of how things work, you imagine there was some shady backroom deal where some Google executive tracked down this guy and showed up with a briefcase full of cash, and they shook hands, and he removed the Google Analytics from the list of trackers. But actually, as far as I can tell, something much more interesting happened. Google Analytics works via JavaScript, where if you have a website and you wish to use Google Analytics, you just import a little bit of JavaScript into your web page, and that does everything for you. And so when you block Google Analytics, you just block that JavaScript from loading. And Google started putting generic JavaScript functions into their Google Analytics code. And so the rationale is, hey, you guys are importing this JavaScript anyway. we're just going to throw in a few kind of useful generic JavaScript functions that you might want to use as long as you're importing this JavaScript. And so what happened was people started using that. And now, if you block Google Analytics, you don't just break the analytics, you break the functionality of the website. Because people are depending on this JavaScript to have their website operate at all. And so what they've done is they've expanded the scope of the choice that you have to make. It used to be a very small choice. Do I want to be tracked by Google or not? That's a pretty simple choice. You block JavaScript from the Google Analytics stuff. But now they've expanded the scope of the choice, so it's, do I want to use this website at all or not? And that becomes a much more difficult choice. So why is this significant for us, this concept of choice? This man's name is John Poindexter. And he's incidentally the person who was found to be most responsible for the Iran-Contra scandal. He was convicted of lying to Congress, but never went to jail. And in 2001, he started this program called Total Information Awareness. When he announced this program, he said that data must be made available in large-scale repositories with enhanced semantic content for easy analysis. What he essentially wanted to do was siphon off all email traffic, all web traffic, all credit card history, everybody's medical records, take everything out of the internet and throw it into one big sink, one big pile, without worrying about analyzing it in real time or trying to make sense of the data as it was coming in. And then he wanted to develop technology to easily mine this data, to pull out the statistics, the relationships, the correlations, patterns, profiles at any later time. So you could always go back and get all the information you needed about somebody, right? And so this was like the totalitarian future. This was the cypherpunk nightmare. This is what everybody had been worried about and preparing for. And so people freaked out. I mean, this was a big deal, to the point where even people in Congress freaked out and were like, "What are you guys doing?" And the program was shut down. Well, so why did people freak out, right? Well, I mean, if we look at this, clearly these people are from the old world. They don't really know what they're doing. This was their actual logo that they chose for their program. This isn't like The Onion came up with a logo for the thing. This was the actual thing they chose. There's the pyramid with the eye of God and a light beam shining down on the entire planet. That bit of Latin under there means knowledge is power. I mean, these, if you're going to have some scary government program like this, you need like a friendly logo, something like this, right? Don't call it total information awareness. Call it like the Kitten Surveillance Society or something, I mean, what you want is something almost cartoonish, something colorful and playful, something that seems friendly and almost childish, right? Something like this. Because really, if you go back and you look at what Total Information Awareness was trying to do, Google has done all of these things and more. They've they've gone beyond the scope of what TIA wanted. I mean, they're collecting all of these things and they're keeping them forever. And if there's one thing that Google has really excelled at doing, it's at making sense of large repositories of data, of being able to sift through all of that and pull out the statistics and relationships and profiles that they're looking for. Now, of course, Google's intent is different. They're not John Poindexter. They're trying to sell advertising. But make no mistake about it, they are in the surveillance business. That is how they make money, by surveilling you and using that information. And so the effect is the same, right? But there's this quote: "Who knows more about the citizens in their own country, Kim Jong-il or Google?" I think it's pretty clearly Google. But again, there's this question of why are people so afraid of Kim Jong-il? Why are people so afraid of the John Poindexters of the world? And yet, Google, who knows much more, is not as scary. Well, again, I think it comes back to choice, right? That we choose to use Google, whereas we don't choose to be surveilled by Kim Jong-il or John Poindexter. But again, I think that this choice is expanding, right? The scope of this choice is expanding, such that it's becoming harder and harder to not participate. And eventually, I think it will expand to the point where, again, it is a choice between participating in society or not. I mean, already, if you were to decide, well, I don't want to participate in Google, so I'm not going to email anybody that has a Gmail account. You know, you would be removed from some part of the social narrative, right? You would be unable to communicate with some part of society, and that is going to continue to grow and expand. Yes. So I think the trends have changed, right? I would say that now we have technology that actually alters society. It changes the fabric of society and how people communicate. And that as a result, information accumulates in really distinct places, and that then eavesdroppers just move to those points of accumulation, right? So the past was this direct reality, right? You saw people trying to embed surveillance electronics into every piece of consumer communications electronics, right? That was a really direct thing. And the present is much more subtle, right? Instead of doing that, they just move to the few points where information naturally accumulates, right? Places like room 641A in the AT&T WorldCom facility, where the NSA has been operating a fiber optic splitter for a long time. The past was direct. You saw things like total information awareness, where they wanted to directly take your data and start analyzing it. And the present is much more subtle, right? That you volunteer your data to these places, it accumulates there, and then the eavesdroppers just move to those points, right? So when I think about the future and what I'm interested in working on in the future, the first thing that comes to mind is that I want to start dealing with the choices that aren't really choices. I want to acknowledge that these choices are expanding and that eventually they become demands, and I want to start to address that. So some projects that I'm working on in that light, and that other people are working on in that light. The first thing I thought about was, okay, so what's the deal with Google, really? What's going on there? The big problem is that they have a lot of information. They know everything about you. They record all of this stuff. They know who your friends are, where you live, where you work. They know about your health, your political leanings, your love life. They know not just a lot about what you're doing, but they also have some significant insight into things that you're thinking about. And they've done a really good job of defining this debate by controlling the terms, right? They say stuff like, we anonymize your data after 9 months, right? And what they mean by anonymize is that they drop the last octet of your IP address in their logs, right? So that's not anonymity, but they've done a good job of defining it as anonymity such that they can just say, we anonymize your data. They've also done this masterful thing with the Google dashboard, right, where they're like, yeah, we take your privacy really seriously, so we're going to put it under control. And so the interesting things about this for me is, one, they obviously don't show you all of the things that they know about you. They just show you the most obvious things. But two, in order to participate in a private experience with Google, you now have to be tracked, right? Like you have to maintain a cookie, a session cookie, and always visit them or whatever. And have an account and all this stuff in order to maintain privacy, which is this nice inversion that I think that they've done. And they've warned us, right? Eric Schmidt, the CEO of Google, warned us that if there's something you don't want anyone to know, maybe you shouldn't be doing it in the first place. And then, the other thing that we've learned, there was these Aurora attacks, right? And it seems likely that they were largely about intercept, right? That one thing that we learned is that it seems as if Google is running intercept systems on their network for law enforcement. And then other eavesdroppers who don't have a legal backing, maybe foreign nationals, wanted access to those same intercept systems. And so I think this is a trend that we're going to see, that as more and more information accumulates in these distinct places, that they're going to become more and more valuable targets for not just eavesdroppers with legal backings, but other eavesdroppers that wish to have access to that information as well. So I think it's going to become more and more dangerous. So one project that I've started working on is called Google Sharing. And the premise is that we want to try and reject this choice, this false choice between maintaining privacy and not using Google. We have to acknowledge that, okay, it's not really possible in this society to just not use Google or not communicate with people via Gmail or whatever. And so we want a way to continue to use Google services and still maintain privacy. And if they're not going to give that to us, then we need to provide it for ourselves. And so it's a two-part system. It's a Firefox add-on as well as a custom proxy server. And the way it works is that the add-on sits in your browser and it watches all of your normal internet traffic, right? And anything that is just normal internet stuff just goes directly to the internet, totally unmolested, nothing has changed, there's no performance implications. But then if it sees a request for a Google service that does not require a login, so these are things like Google Search, Google Images, Google News, Google Products, Google Maps, but not things like Google Mail or Google Checkout, then it siphons off that request and passes it up to a Google sharing proxy server. The Google sharing proxy server maintains a pool of identities. And these identities are basically just a set of unique HTTP headers that are sort of like the fingerprint of your web browser, as well as a cookie that was issued by Google. And so it has this pool, and then when a request comes in, it randomly selects an identity from the pool, takes all of the identifying information off the request, tacks the identifying information from the identity onto the request, and passes it up to Google. Then Google processes that, responds back to the proxy server, and we relay it back to the client. So from Google's perspective, there's just this large corporate NAT that has this one IP address, and there's all these clients behind it. And there's all these cookies that seem totally normal. But from the client's perspective, it's impossible, or should be impossible, for Google to identify individual clients, because these cookies are constantly being passed around between users, and your IP address is obscured by the proxy server. Additionally, we encrypt this first link between the client and the Google sharing proxy using SSL. So even for services that Google does not give SSL access to, like Google Maps and Google News and Google Products and stuff like that, you get SSL protection on the client side. And so how does it look? Well, it looks totally normal. It's basically imperceptible. There's extremely low latency. You don't even really notice that this is running. You can use any of Google's services like Google Maps or Google News or Google Search or whatever. It all happens totally transparently. The only difference is that in the bottom right-hand corner, there's a little status telling you that Google sharing is enabled. We've also now gotten kind of a win from Google, because what they've done is they've given us SSL search, where you can now issue search queries to Google using SSL. And so what we can do now is actually have the clients prefetch cookies from the Google sharing proxy server and then make an SSL connection all the way to Google that's just bounced through the proxy server, so that even the proxy server itself would not be able to look at the search data. So you don't have to trust the proxy to not look at your requests either. So you get this nice level of anonymity, and also, you don't have to trust this proxy server that you're using. So this is available at googlesharing.net. We've been operating this for a while now. We have around 80,000 users, and it's going pretty well. Another project that I think is just sort of interesting that was developed by this guy, Professor Urs Hengartner at the University of Waterloo, is this thing called Face Cloak, right? The Google problem is a little bit more straightforward, right? Because we're not actually trying to share information with Google when we use Google. We're just trying to get information from Google. Whereas things like Facebook, you're actually trying to share information. And I think the observation that the FaceCloak people made is that really what you're trying to do is share some information with a discrete set of friends. But you don't really want to share information with Facebook, the company, or the website, And so what they did is they wrote this little Firefox add-on, and it sits in your browser. And you can pre-pen whatever information you want to share with like 2 @ symbols. And the add-on sees that and automatically encrypts that information when it posts it up to to Facebook. And then they have options that make it really easy to share keys with all the people in your friends network. So if they're also running this add-on, then it will transparently decrypt it when it shows it on their web browsers. So basically, the user experience ends up being the same for everybody that's using Facebook. The only difference is that Facebook themselves never gets the data. They just get these opaque encrypted blogs, which I think is kind of a neat idea, and I'd like to see more of this in the future. I think you can apply the same thing to projects like Twitter. Twitter is one part broadcast, one part conversation. For the conversation bit, there's no reason for Twitter themselves to have the data, just the people you're trying to have a conversation with. And my second thesis here is that the crypto war that we were talking about in the beginning was largely about this idea of data freedom, right? That there are people who had data, they wanted to share it, and there are other people who were trying to prevent you from sharing that information. And it was easy from that moment to extrapolate a future of data control, to assume that the entire future was going to continue along these lines of people trying to control the data that you have. And so a lot of the privacy and anonymity projects that we have today were born out of that reality of imagining this future of data control. And so we got things like darknets, data havens, hidden services. Out of curiosity, does anybody here use these things? Darknets, data havens? 2 people? 3? 4? So a couple of people, right? But they're not extremely popular. And I think that's because that's not really the future that we got. We didn't get this world of increasing data control. We got this other thing, you know, the cell phone world, the Google world, the Facebook world. And another thing that I've noticed is that a lot of privacy advocates are really in love with the other. You know, these are people like Iranian dissidents and Chinese dissidents. And, but I think what's interesting is that if you look at, you know, what Iranian dissidents are doing, they don't really have that much in common with privacy advocates, you know, and that I think that the reason that privacy advocates are so, you know, in touch with these people in foreign places is that these are the few places in the world that are still speaking that language of data control, that they're still speaking this language of trying to control information. But I think that even those places are beginning to realize that that is not necessarily the most effective strategy. I mean, Iran recently announced that they wanted to launch a national email service. You know, like free email, no limit, unlimited storage, right? And I think that even they realize that the Google model is actually much more effective. That if you start by soliciting rather than demanding information, then it's a much more insidious way to get it, and that in the end it will be much more effective. I also think that the loss of the crypto war was not so much about giving up for the eavesdroppers as it was about changing strategies. The big strategy shift that I've seen is the change from key escrow to key disclosure. And we see that in things like the Regulation of Investigatory Powers Act, or RIPA, that have been popping up in the UK and similar laws in other parts of Europe. And what this law essentially says is anybody can use cryptography, right? We're not going to try and regulate that because that's a hard problem. That's one of these data control problems, and we've seen that doesn't work very well. Instead, what we're going to say is anybody can use cryptography, but then if we ever want to see any of this encrypted traffic, we come to you and we ask for your key. And if you don't give it to us, then we put you in jail. And so this is a problem of key disclosure. And I think that we're suffering from this problem because a lot of the secure protocols that we're using today were not designed with forward security, that they weren't designed with this problem in mind. So again, when I'm thinking about the future and things that I am interested in working on and that I think might be important, the first thing I want to do is deal with these choices that aren't really choices. I want to reject these false choices. The second is I want to worry a little bit less about information freedom. And the third is that I want to worry a lot more about this forward security problem. There's this very nice paper that was written, I think, in 2002 or 2004 called Off the Record Communication, or Why Not to Use PGP. It was written by Nikita Borisov, Ian Goldberg, and Eric Brewer. And they make a few very simple observations. First, they look at the PGP model. And I'm sure people are familiar with this. If you have an email that you would like to send Bob, you get Bob's public key, and you encrypt your email with Bob's public key, and you send it to Bob. The next time you want to send an email to Bob, you do the same thing. The third time, the same thing. This can continue over a period of 20 years. But the problem is that now, if at any point in the future Bob's key is compromised, then all of your previous traffic is compromised as well. It was all encrypted using the same key, so that someone could just record 20 years, a year, a month, a day of encrypted traffic, and then if they ever manage to get that key, they can go back and record all of the, go back and decrypt all of the recorded traffic. So the big problem is one key compromise affects all previous correspondence. There's this other weird thing where the secrecy of what I write is dependent on your security practices, right? I'm a paranoid person. I feel like I have sane security practices, but I don't know about the person that I'm writing to. And so it's this strange thing where really you'd like for the security of what you write to be dependent on your security practices. And the third is that the PGP model gives you authenticity, but it doesn't give you deniability. So right, if I sign the encrypted message to Bob that it says, yeah, I was thinking that Eve is a real jerk, now Bob knows it came from me, but if that message is then compromised and decrypted in the future, there's no way for me to deny that I wrote it. It definitely came from me. It has my digital signature on it. It's undeniable. And so the OTR model is a little bit different. You still have a key pair, but this time your keys are only used to sign ephemeral session keys. They're never used to encrypt anything. And each time you send a message to the person you're communicating with, it also includes 1/2 of a new key exchange. So each time you exchange messages, you're completing a key exchange, and the key material that you're using is constantly rolling forward, and the old key material is discarded. So now, if any time in the future someone records your traffic and then comes to you and tries to get your key, even if they can get something off of your computer, they don't have the keys for all of your previous correspondence, and so that all of that stuff is still safe. Additionally, you have messages that are encrypted with your session key, and this time, instead of authenticating them with a signature, you use what's known as a message authentication code. And that key is derivative from the session key. So while signatures are undeniable because they have only one possible author, MACs are immediately sort of deniable because they have two possible authors, right? Because two people know the session key, you and the person you're communicating with. So if the person you're communicating with says, Moxie wrote this, it's just as likely that actually they wrote it as I did. Additionally, since this key material is constantly rolling forward, that means that the old MACs are rolling forward as well, which means that as soon as you're done with whatever key that you're on, you can publish the old MAC keys, and now anybody can forge previous messages. So you get this authenticity, but also this strong notion of deniability, because anybody could have written this thing that they say that they have. So anyway, I think that this model is going to become more and more important in the future, and that we need to start thinking about this in all secure protocols as we move forward. Along those lines, I've started a project called Whisper Systems. And the idea is that I want to try and bring forward secure protocols into mobile devices. And so here again, I feel like I'm trying to combine these two things, right? Mobile devices are this place where we're dealing with these false choices. And then I also want to bring this forward security problem into that place. And so along those lines, we have two applications available for free right now. One is called Redphone, and it's an encrypted voice application for Android. The way it works is just like the normal dialer in Android. It functions totally transparently, and it uses VoIP. So there's this problem though, right, where like VoIP tends to suck. It just never really seems to work very well, and particularly in the mobile environment, it seems to be really flaky. And so, looking at that and thinking about, well, why is this always so flaky? To me, it seems to come down to the signaling question. That normally, the way it works is you have some asterisk PBX or some other PBX sitting on the internet, and you do something like SIP. You have some SIP connection to this PBX, and that signals for call setups and teardowns. And the problem is that in the mobile environment, that doesn't really work very well, because now your mobile phone has to maintain a constant TCP connection or keep alive a UDP connection to this signaling server. And in the mobile environment, you're dealing with not necessarily very reliable network connectivity. You're switching between networks. And then if you are maintaining this connection, your phone has to stay on all the time, which means that the battery life isn't very good. And so it just doesn't seem like a very good fit. And so in thinking about it, we realized that the mobile environment actually has an entire signaling infrastructure that was already built by the telecoms. And so what we want to do is, in taking VoIP into the mobile environment, we want to leverage the existing signaling infrastructure. And so actually we just use SMS to signal for call setups and teardowns. So the advantages of this is that your phone doesn't need to maintain some constant network connection to a server, which means your phone can go to sleep and not be active. And the second is you don't need the equivalent of a Skype ID or a SIP account or something like that. All of the addressing is based on your normal phone number, since that's how SIP addresses devices. So if you know someone's phone number, you know how to call them using Redphone. And the last thing is you don't need to run some kind of VoIP server or set up a VoIP account or something like that. You just install this app, and now you're ready to go. So then the question is, okay, how do we get security out of this VoIP connection? And so most VoIP uses RTP, the real-time protocol for transmitting voice. And so what we do is we use ZRTP, which is Philip Zimmerman's extension to RTP. And ZRTP is a pretty nice protocol. The way it works is you negotiate an ephemeral session key for each call. And then from that ephemeral session key, you derive what's known as a short authentication string. And that is just 2 words that appear at the bottom of the in-call screen, flatfoot Eskimo in this case. And so to verify the authenticity of your call, once it's set up, you just read the 2 words over the phone to the other person. And if they have the same 2 words, then you know that the call is authentic. There's no certificates, there's no certificate authorities, there's no fingerprints, there's no signatures, there's no web of trust, there's none of that crap. You just read these 2 words to each other, and you know that you have a secure call. And also, the 2 words are always strangely prophetic. Or, you know, it's like a little haiku. You know, like something will happen, you'll be like, flatfoot Eskimo. Yeah, that's how I feel today. So it's kind of fun. And the other application that we have is called TextSecure. It's a secure text messaging application with a protocol that is derivative of OTR, this thing that we've been talking about. And it works just like your normal text messaging application. You can use it to text people that aren't running TextSecure. Everything is identical to the stock Android text messaging application. And once again, every time you exchange messages with someone that is running TextSecure, the key material is constantly rolling forward. So we get this forward security property of even if someone is to record all of your SMS traffic and then somehow later seize your device, they won't be able to decrypt those previous SMS messages. So anyway, these projects are just some small hope that I have that we can work on things to help reduce the scope of these choices that we are increasingly faced with. They're all available for free online. Please download them, try them, check them out, talk about them, let us know what you think. Thank you. Question?
For the red phone application, it seems like you're relying on the voice pattern of the other person to know that you're actually talking to them. Am I right on that? Is there anything you can do to make that better?
Sure. The question is, for a red phone, it seems like you're relying on the voice of the person that you're communicating with to know that you're actually talking with them. And yeah, that's true. You have to know the person you're calling in order to authenticate them. Yeah. Yeah. Question is, are there plans to move the red phone to iPhone? Yes, we would like to support other mobile devices. The problem is that, of course, dealing with Apple is kind of a drag, and that I have a feeling that they wouldn't allow this in the App Store because it is VoIP. But we'll see.
When did you start both the Whisper Assist and mobile sharing, and how many usage do you have on the end?
The question is, when did we start Whisper Systems and Google Sharing? Google Sharing, I think, is about 6 months old. Whisper Systems, I think, is about 2 months old. Google Sharing has like 80,000 users. Whisper Systems, we have like a couple thousand users that are using Red Phone. Sure. The question is, how do you deal with NAT traversal in the mobile environment? And we run what's known as a turn server. Basically just relays traffic. So it just passes back and forth opaque encrypted packets. And it's actually pretty low bandwidth just because the voice streams are encoded using a codec. So it's fine. Yeah. The question is there a way to transmit false GPS information from Android phones? Actually, I was talking to someone last night who has this whole plan for doing that, but but by spoofing, by basically faking out the GPS in the phone instead of trying to, do some other thing. The problem is still there's the triangulation information of where you are, so you have to do something about that as well. Yeah.
There's actually an Android permission extension which allows you to send fake or forged permission sets. I think that might allow you to at least fake out a GPS query on it.
Yeah, maybe. Okay, well, thanks, everybody.